Okay, let's jump right into this explainer on Shakespeare's As You Like It. What's so fascinating about this particular play is its incredibly unique structure. If you look at the plot, pretty much all the heavy lifting, the betrayals, the banishments, the death threats, is jammed right into the very beginning. And then all the neat resolutions, they happen at the very end. That leaves the entire middle three acts as this wide open, completely unhurried space to explore human nature, identity, and love. It's not about racing to a finish line, right? It's really about what happens when you hit pause on normal life. To truly grasp the depth of this play, we are going to follow a massive escape and return arc. We'll be looking at broken brotherhoods and rivalry, the escape to Arden, disguise and alter egos, the tangled web of love, and finally, the grand wedding finale. So we're mapping this whole journey from those initial toxic family rivalries straight through to the grand wedding altar. Section 1. Broken brotherhoods and rivalry, setting the stakes. We really have to start by establishing the stakes in the world of the court. This is a place characterized by ruthless political competition and seriously broken families. Before we even get a hint of romance, we're dropped into a world where brother has completely turned against brother. And this beautifully illustrates the mirror image nature of these conflicts. The corrupt court essentially gives us two distinct sets of warring brothers that kick the entire plot into motion. On the political stage, Duke Frederick has overthrown his older brother, the rightful Duke Sr., and banished him out into the wilderness. Meanwhile, down in the family plot, a nobleman named Oliver is aggressively suppressing his younger brother, Orlando, basically treating him like a peasant rather than a gentleman. The core motivation behind this family betrayal is absolutely fascinating. To understand why Oliver hates Orlando enough to actually orchestrate a deadly wrestling match, yes, a deadly wrestling match, we have to look at the legal concept of primogeniture. This rule gave the eldest son literally everything, which, as you can imagine, completely warped sibling dynamics. It turned what should be a brotherly bond into this toxic master-servant relationship. Oliver even admits he doesn't fully know why he hates Orlando, but it's pretty clear. Orlando is naturally charismatic and beloved, even without a fancy education or money. So Oliver's intense, burning jealousy drives him to try and have his own brother killed in the ring. Section 2. Escape to Arden, the pastoral shift. Driven by banishment and those very real death threats, our characters are forced to run. They undergo what's called a pastoral shift, fleeing the artificial, highly dangerous court for the completely unpredictable natural world of the Forest of Arden. But the forest isn't just a location on a map. As this quote highlights, they can fleet the time carelessly as they did in the Golden World. It acts as a psychological timeout space. Back in the court, everyone is sweating for promotion, they're plotting, they're constantly watching their backs. But out in Arden, the clock is stopped. Urgencies are totally suspended, and time itself becomes unmeasured. It's this rare space where characters have the freedom to just exist and talk. Notice the striking juxtaposition here. Now, Shakespeare doesn't pretend the forest is some perfect, flawless utopia. I mean, our characters still face real threats like starvation and at one point even a wild lioness. But compared to the envious, suffocating court, the forest provides a much-needed release from strict social hierarchies. Suddenly, the duke's daughter and a poor shepherd can exist in the exact same space. It's an environment that provides the vital breathing room needed for these characters to actually grow and change. Section 3. Disguise and alter egos. Within this suspended reality, characters are free to experiment with totally new roles. Once you remove the rigid rules of society, you can just try on a completely new identity and see how it fits. To travel safely into exile, Rosalind and her fiercely loyal cousin Celia adopt alter egos. Rosalind becomes a young man named Ganymede, and Celia becomes a humble countrywoman named Aliana. And what's amazing is that these disguises grant them unprecedented freedom. I mean, they literally go out and buy a cottage and a flock of sheep. They establish completely independent lives, miles away from the patriarchal control of their fathers and uncles. Now, Shakespeare leans heavily into the comedic absurdity here. Orlando, who is desperately in love with Rosalind, runs into Ganymede in the forest. Rosalind, who is still disguised as Ganymede, remember, convinces Orlando to practice wooing him as if he were the real Rosalind, claiming it's going to cure him of his lovesickness. So keep in mind, back in Shakespeare's time, women weren't allowed on stage, so you literally had a male actor playing a girl who was disguised as a boy who is asking her crush to pretend she's a girl. It is an absolute masterpiece of layered identity. Section 4. The Tangled Web of Love. This whole meta-theatrical role play is the perfect transition into examining the deeply tangled web of love that just totally overtakes the forest. Because with all these shifting identities, things get beautifully complicated. Since Rosalind is disguised as a man, she and Orlando can completely bypass all the stiff formal rules of traditional courtly romance. They get to explore this intensely intimate, unfiltered connection. She gets to test him, tease him, and find out who he really is, challenging fixed societal norms every step of the way. And, of course, this dynamic introduces distinct homoerotic undertones to the play, as Orlando forms this deeply romantic bond with someone he genuinely perceives to be a young man. The play brilliantly maps out 4 distinct variations of romance. Shakespeare is essentially showing us that love in Arden takes many different and often hilarious forms. First, you have Orlando and Rosalind, whose love is intelligent and tested through all this role play. Then you have Oliver and Celia experiencing a sudden, wildly intense, transformative love at first sight. Down another path, there's Sylvius and Phoebe playing out the agonizing, totally exaggerated tropes of unrequited love and obsession. And finally, you have Touchstone and Audrey grounding us with a purely physical, comic, wordplay-heavy rural romance. Section 5, the Grand Wedding Finale. With all these overlapping love triangles, we quickly hit a breaking point. The most chaotic element being that the shepherdess Phoebe absolutely rejects Sylvius and falls madly in love with Ganymede, who is, of course, actually Rosalind. So the crucial question we have to ask is, how in the world do you logically untangle this incredibly confusing romantic web when almost everyone is falling for the wrong perceived identity? Ganymede is promised to marry Phoebe, Orlando desperately wants Rosalind, Sylvius is just desperate in general. How'd you solve a puzzle this twisted? Well, the answer is you don't use logic, you use magic. Specifically, through the sudden, literal appearance of Hymen, the Roman god of marriage. When human games get way too tangled up, a literal god arrives to sort it out. His script lines are literally there to step in, bar confusion, and make conclusion. In this rapid-fire sequence of magical wrap-ups, Rosalind drops her disguise and finally reunites with both her father and Orlando. Phoebe realizes the truth about Ganymede and, well, settles for Sylvius. Hymen steps in and unites all 4 couples in a massive, grand joint wedding. And to top the whole thing off, we get news that the evil, usurping Duke Frederick walked into the forest, met an old religious man, instantly repented on the spot, and decided to just give the entire dukedom back. Just like that, the romantic chaos is solved and the political rivalries vanish. Ultimately, this builds the ultimate thematic arc of the entire play. Think of it as a journey into the wild to heal. The characters absolutely had to leave that restrictive, corrupt court. They had to experience a profound transformation in the freedom of the forest, discover their true identities, and actually reconcile with their enemies. All of this had to happen before they could return to civilization to establish a restored, just social order. But the timeout has to officially end. Rosalind steps out alone to deliver the epilogue. In Shakespeare's time, the actor would have shed the character's woodland power, completely breaking the illusion and transitioning the audience from the magical world of the play right back into the real world. The game is over. And this leaves us with a totally fascinating final thought to chew on today. The play strongly suggests that the rigid rules of everyday society can sometimes keep us from our truest selves, and we actually need a temporary escape to grow. So I'll leave you with this. If we all need that space to shed our rigid social roles, where do you go to find your truest self? Where is your Forest of Arden?